When we begin a module, I usually like to just connect in with everyone and connect in with our sort of motivation. Some of us have been coming, ongoing, and two or three of us are just coming new. So again, it's always just good to check with intention. Each module is a different subject matter anyway, on the path. So I usually like us to sort of check in, just each one of us saying a few words about why we're here. So, but before we do that, I think we'll just do a short meditation. So I often start with a longer meditation, but tonight, usually in the first module, start with a shorter meditation. And then we have a little bit of check-in, of just just individually what our aims, our wishes are, our goals for coming to this module, what we expect it, what we'd like to get out of it. So I want to check in with that. Let me just, I want to, give everybody the opportunity to just say a few words. But first of all, we just start with just, 5 minutes this week. As I say, next week and the weeks moving forward, we start with a bit more longer meditation, especially because the topic of this module is, establishing a daily practice, which really revolves around establishing a sort of meditation practice in this tradition. How do we do that? So I want to, support you by doing a little bit more longer meditation at the beginning of each module to give you an idea of how you might set up your daily practice, or perhaps if you've got one already, deepen your daily practice. So before we begin though, just taking a few minutes to connect in with our body, our breath. Maybe a couple of deep breaths in through the body, exhaling any stale air or wind, As I always say, the airs in the body, they support the mind. The quality of the air, the wind, the lung, they say in Tibetan, wind energy. It really supports, if it's clear in the body, even with yoga, that's the idea, We clear the airs with movement, with breathing, movement and breath, and it supports our mind. So just a couple of inhalations, exhalations, letting go any stale air, just that we feel in the body and mind. And for a couple of minutes, either just being with the breathing, the regular breath at the tip of the nostrils, or perhaps we want to ground our energy more by being aware of the sensation of the sit bones on the cushion. Just being with that sensation, earthing ourselves, so to speak, And then in that space, taking a moment from your own side this evening to clarify your intention, your motivation, the sense what thoughts drove you here, inspired you to come this evening. And then in that space, as we usually do at the beginning of teachings, we connect with our refuge. So the last module we did was on refuge. So again, just thinking about, based on that module, what we've heard already, your own experience. What's our experience of refuge right now? What do we understand by refuge? Trying to bring a sense of that mind up just now before we chant or recite the prayer together. Even though, for some of us we might be new, to this, but these prayers, all these prayers have a sort of power because they were composed by holy beings. This one was composed by Lama Atisha to try just to remind us to be able to reflect each time we recite it, reflecting on these qualities of refuge and bodhicitta. Refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, feeling that support from the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, through their enlightened qualities. And also in that space, through that support, trying to just generate a little bit of bodhicitta, we want to get enlightened. We want to develop our heart and mind in the path, right now in this path, Buddha's path, to bring all sentient beings to enlightenment. So again, it's just bringing up whatever feeling we have, refuge and bodhicitta. Bringing that to mind as we recite. We're going to chant one time in Tibetan, twice in English. Sangye chodan sogi chognamla janju bardu dagni kyapsuchi dagi chinso gebe sonamge drola penjir sangye druparshok. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I'm just going to take a minute to share, as I usually do with my classes. I usually have let me see. I usually have a screen, a PowerPoint that I share. So I'm just going to put that up now for us with some of the key points for the class, with the class. So yeah, welcome. As I say, this is Discovering Buddhism Module 8, Establishing a Daily Practice. So this is where we are. And so, just to begin, just a little bit of an overview of what we've covered so far. That's what we're going to do. Why, also exploring a little bit tonight, why a daily practice is important. I think a lot of us know and feel that, but a little bit more in context with developing our mind, especially in the, the Lam Rim, why it's so important to have this daily practice. And then also, some ideas, again, from really the Lam Rim, how we establish a daily practice so we can develop our mind in the Lam Rim in all these topics. So what have we covered so far? Mind and its potential. The fact that we have consciousness and mind, we have this Buddha nature that is allowing us, giving us opportunity in every moment to be able to develop our mind in the causes of happiness. That's where happiness comes from our mind, how we think. So, that's what we discovered in the first module in a nutshell. Then we did a module on how to meditate. So I'm going to go over some of that very briefly in this module again, because it's, they're very similar, the topics, establishing a daily practice and how to meditate. Well, it's all around, developing this meditation practice. And then, we also discussed precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, karma, refuge. These are some of the other topics that we've been through so far. And really what they do is they set the stage for us to be able to integrate the teachings in our daily life. They motivate us. I mean, in many ways, the teachings on precious human rebirth, lower capable being, you know, that's what we've covered with the Lam Rim, the path to enlightenment so far, is it's kind of giving us this kind of foothold onto the path. You know, refuge is, it's having a sense of refuge in this kind of ability, this potential we have to develop our mind in the causes of happiness and all the way up to enlightenment, you know. So taking a sense of inner refuge in that, and also the teachings on karma by observing karma. So these two things are what really support us for, you know, to move on with the rest of the Lam Rim. You know, that's what we sort of discover, especially in the last two modules. So in a sense, really, the teachings we've covered so far in terms of precious human life being precious, you know, that just trying to develop awareness that our life is fragile. You know, we have this fragility. You know, we feel very solid and strong, but you know, we don't know when the time of death is going to come. You know, and some of us have already experienced, you know, that things can turn upside down in our life very, very quickly. You know, so these contemplations, they're the basis for us really gaining an inspiration to practice, to use the opportunity we have of our potential, you know, to sit on the cushion and really work with our minds. That's what Precious Human Rebirth, the teachings on that, death and impermanence, that's what they're supposed to draw us into, give us this inspiration, this kind of energy to sit and to practice. And then on top of that, you know, what do we practice in the meantime in our daily life? We observe karma. We try to observe the actions of our body, speech, and mind, those which bring about peace for ourselves and others. You know, and less harm to others and more happiness to ourselves and others. This is the basis of karma. And, you know, so on, and then also trying to turn away a little bit, less clinging, attachment to the sort of concerns of this life, you know. It doesn't mean that we don't need a job, we don't have family, we don't have friends, you know, but it's how we approach that in our life with less, you know, less anxiety, less fear, less expectation, you know, just less clinging. So we're trying to, in the lower scope, just kind of relax the mind a little bit by remembering the reality of life, you know, death and impermanence. We have this precious opportunity to develop our mind by observing karma, taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And on that basis, with these kind of teachings combined, it's a very strong kind of basis for us to then develop in the other topics. But it's really how we do that is all with time by we have to sit and go back to the cushion. We need to go back to the cushion and really work with our minds, because that's the place where we train. It's like we train our mind on the cushion. That's our meditation practice. It's a mind training that we need on the cushions just to work with what's going on in our lives. So again, as I mentioned, you know, it's really like, this is a foothold here, you see. So I think some of us have experienced that already. The more we sort of take refuge in the teachings and the layout of the Lam Rim, you know, the layout of having this precious human life, having, you know, karma is like a strong refuge. You're really trying to be aware of your actions, of your body, speech, and mind. That's a refuge for us. That's a deep refuge throughout our lives, you know, throughout our day. So it gives us a strong foothold to be able to kind of move on to the next parts of the path. But really the main foothold we need to develop is this foothold as a daily practice. You know, we need to rely on that to sort of progress in our life, just like here in the image, you know, like we're trying to climb a mountain. So the foothold there is really like our daily practice. We need to have that so we can rely on that. Even if it's really short, it gives us incredible support. If we just keep doing something continually, it's incredible after a year or two how that supports our mind for our daily life, and especially for our spiritual development as we move along the aspects of the Lam Rim. So again, precious human rebirth is so important, that teaching, you know, having this opportunity that we have right now. That one's very important because that's the one that ideally gives us this sort of motivation to sit in the cushion. We wake up and we remember right now, there's so much suffering in the world, even if we don't understand the depths of the Four Noble Truths, the real depths of the causes of suffering. It's really evident that we're in a time of turmoil, change, fear, anxiety. So even more so, we need a sit-in practice for ourselves and to be able to help and benefit others through these especially turbulent times in the world. So of course, the long-term goal in this practice, as we go through the modules, the long-term goal is really identifying the root of the problems in the mind, the root being the ignorance, this kind of way that we grasp at a wrong sense of self. That's the cause in this tradition. And, what Buddha taught is the main cause of suffering is the way that we wrongly view a self. We have a wrong view of that, but that's very difficult to see right now, yeah? I mean, most of us can't really identify the functioning of the wrong view of in their mind right now. It's very hard to see that. So in order to get to there, if we really want to develop, as say we want to deepen our practice, well, in this tradition, deepening our practice is getting more insight into really the causes of suffering. What causes us? How do they manifest in our mind? What causes fear, anxiety, attachment, anger? The main cause is the wrong view of self. And that's really where we want to deepen our practice into. And that's where we deepen as we go into the further modules in the Lam Rim. But in order to do that, we absolutely need a daily practice. We need to be doing some fundamental practices so we can cleanse the mind, purify the mind, and we maybe start to see the functioning of the delusions in the mind. We can mostly see the functioning of attachment. We can mostly see some functioning of anger, but to see the functioning of ignorance, this kind of how ignorance clouds our minds, how we're not able to really see the way we do exist. It's not that we don't exist at all. That's not easy to see. That's quite hidden, as I mentioned in the teachings on karma. Karma's a hidden phenomena. Well, to us right now, even trying to identify ignorance in our mind and then see through the wisdom, develop the wisdom to overcome that's not easy. So if we have these kind of goals, if we want to deepen in that way, we absolutely need a daily practice. There's no way without that. So just to kind of also just go into a little bit why we need a daily practice, why we need to sit, meditate, and do some of these practices that I'm going to talk about in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So without a daily practice, if we simply just listen to teachings for a while and think, oh, they're quite nice, what can happen is, and some of us have probably experienced this already, we develop what we call an insensitivity to Dharma. It's like once you're overcome by insensitivity to Dharma, your mind stream becomes kind of ruined and you're incapable of being tamed. So this is a little bit strong, these words, but basically, if we don't, if we just kind of go and listen to teachings for a while, but we don't establish a sort of sitting practice, some sort of purification practice, collection and merit practice, what happens is we think, oh, we'll go to a teaching on karma, maybe a few, and then we think, well, I've heard that already. And it doesn't, the first few times we hear it really might influence and impact our mind. But then we hear it again, maybe, we go after a few months, we hear the same teaching and think, well, I've heard that already, I already know that, but it just stays at the level of the head. All these teachings, we want to get them from the head to the heart. And that's a process. That's not an easy process. But if we leave them at the level of the head, where they need to start, there's no question. And sometimes some teachings touch us really deeply in the heart right away. But even though they touch us one time in the heart, it doesn't mean we hear it again. or we think about it again and it touches us in the heart again. And I think we've probably all experienced that, you know. So, and this is what Urs is talking about. We need these refreshes all the time. We want to approach the teachings, we want to approach our practice with this kind of fresh mind. Because otherwise, when we listen to teachings, we read the Dharma, we'll slowly develop an insensitivity without a daily practice that kind of moistens our mind, you know. So how it's achieved is like, so here through the Guru's speech, you know, so listening to teachings, listening to teachers that inspire you, along with your own efforts to listen to the Dharma properly. So I'm not going to go into that. You can read it in the Lam Rim, but there's certain ways that it's really good to listen to the Dharma. But mostly it's through, you know, we're going to cover, as we cover when we go into a daily practice, you know, how it's really, in this context, we're talking about us, you know, if we don't have a sitting practice, a daily practice where we sort of purify, collect merit, you know, then it's not easy for our minds to stay moist, and it's not easy for the Lam Rim, the Dharma, to continue to affect our mind, feel rich, feel kind of fresh in the mind. So there's this analogy, you know, where they use this analogy in the Tibetan tradition with leather. Of course, in Tibet, at the time of Tibet, you know, and even now, of course, we have leather shoes, and we have to sort of polish and condition them, you know, protect the leather. So there's an analogy from the Tibetan times where they used butter, you know, to clean the leather. That's what they had. So in this analogy, our mind is the leather, and the butter is the sort of conditioner that moistens the leather, you know, softens it. So the analogy is, you know, that so they soften the leather using the butter, you know. So like that, so you know, they work it really well. They work the butter really well into the leather, and the leather becomes really soft. So like that, what we want to do and have a daily practice that it's kind of you know, it has the contents of the daily practice or the ingredients of the daily practice mean that, you know, when we rub, it allows us, it's kind of allowing us to rub the Dharma so our minds get softer. So our meditations mean that our minds, you know, that our mind starts to soften through these practices. And then the Dharma penetrates more into our mind. So our mind becomes really soft and flexible. And it goes into the, you know, the Dharma actually goes into our mind, you know. Because the idea is we want to soften our mind, we want to soften our heart, you know. The delusions are often, they often use that, it's like a rock, you know. Mind can be very hard and not easy to change and flexible. I think we can all relate to places in our life, areas in our mind where we're inflexible, not easy to change. So the idea of practice is to kind of, you know, be like the butter, you know, and it has this impact on our mind where our mind gets softened. And then the Dharma, you know, feels very rich and nourishing. It supports our mind, you know, it moves into the mind. However, there's another analogy, because in Tibet at the time, they used to also store butter in a leather pouch. But what happens when you store butter in this kind of leather pouch is over a time, there's a sort of chemical reaction that happens with the leather and the butter. So, so actually the leather becomes really hard, you know, and so instead of softening the leather, or, you know, of our mind, you know, that butter that stays inside the leather actually hardens the leather, so the pouch becomes harder and harder. So it's a little bit like that. If we just decide to store the Dharma, you know, in a way where we're not really ingesting it, we're not digesting it, we're not using daily practice, we're not meditating, then actually it's like we become insensitive, just like the leather becomes insensitive to the butter, you know, and it actually gets more hard. It doesn't only just become insensitive, it doesn't soften it. Actually, our mind can even harden if we have too much Dharma. There's a danger of that, you know, we get too much Dharma and then we don't apply it, and it can just mean that we're kind of more like we just kind of use the Dharma like to sort of overpower others, control others. And we can see this has happened a lot, maybe in society and religions, you know. People take it and they just leave it at the level of the head, the level of intellectual knowledge, and can even use it to overpower others. And instead of softening the heart, they just use that knowledge to, you know, for power. And the heart becomes even harder. So there's a danger of that in all the traditions and all the religions. So we want to keep our mind fresh and wholesome. We want to keep it moist and free of pride, kind of open to curiosity, to humility, having that humility and curiosity towards the teaching. And that's what happens through daily practice. You know, some of the lamas of the past, I mean, I think Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I don't know, 20, 30, maybe 40 gurus. I'm not sure, but many. I think Lama Tisha, who's one of our lineage holders, he had like 150 gurus, you know, teachers. So how they were, and he actually saw them as their guru. You're not just someone they'd heard teachings from, and that was get nice, and they enjoyed that. You know, they regarded them as like someone who'd benefited their mind. You know, so that's why so many teachers, and it's because they were able to practice in a way to keep the mind moist. They had a strong daily practice. So when you hear teachings, you read, it's always impacting the mind. It's always softening your mind. It's going into the leather of your mind, you know, because that daily practice is really rich, you know. So it's not easy to achieve this, but it's possible, you know. So it's just kind of outlining here that we need both, you know. We need this sitting practice, this daily practices to keep the mind fresh and moist. And again, in many ways, you know, again, we've heard many, you know, all the teachings and the modules now. So it's a little bit where the rubber meets the road now. You know, we really need to start putting into practice a little bit what we've heard, you know. And again, how you do that is again by combining and having this sitting daily meditation practice. And the other thing, you know, as I said, we might end up doing the whole course and just thinking, well, that was nice, but not really seeing it as something that's special. Like maybe like a hobby, can become like a hobby after a while, you know. We're not really seriously implementing it in our mind. So we, especially after the module on refuge, you know, maybe it makes us think, well, do we want to take this as our spiritual refuge, you know, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha? We need to think a wee bit more seriously as we move into these modules. I mean, certainly, you know, we can go through the first course and just listen, reflect, and, you know, we have to just take our time. But there is a point, and sorry, as we develop in our spiritual practice, where we need to be a little bit more serious, you know, and especially in the context of maybe taking vows, you know, whether it's refuge vows, lay vows, maybe be taking bodhisattva vows. So, so we need a daily practice to keep developing these and practicing these in our mind. So this insensitivity to Dharma can happen where we start to just explore other teachers, other paths, and it just becomes like a shopping trip a little bit, our spiritual path. And that doesn't mean that we don't attend other teachings, you know, but it's really like, you know, as I say, it's like this is a kind of point where we sort of recognize we need to have a good sitting practice. So how the Dharma really works, you know, hopefully with a sitting practice, you know, that's strong enough, the Dharma really soaks into our minds. And then even when we hear very simple teachings, sometimes we get a really warm feeling in our heart. Um, and someone mentioned it's a bit like hearing your favorite song. It sort of brings up this, you know, something warm, a really warm feeling in your heart. It moves your mind. I mean, I think we all want to have that when we hear spiritual teachings. We want to be moved. Even if we sit for 2 hours through a class, but we hear one thing and it really moves us deeply, you know, then we carry that with us. But to really have that happen on a more regular basis, we need the support of a daily practice where we're purifying, collecting merit, and receiving the sort of blessing of this practice so we can keep ripening our mind in this sort of path. You know, another way where the Dharma's moving our mind is that sometimes tears come, you know, when we hear Dharma, or our hair stands up in the back of your neck, you know, when we hear special teachings from teachers maybe we have a strong karma with, you know, or a teaching that we've had maybe familiarity with in our past life, and we hear it again, and it's like, it's almost like deja vu, you know, but we didn't maybe hear it this life, but we know it, you know, instinctively, and it moves something deeply in us. So these experiences happen all through having a daily practice. So if you get these from time to time, these experiences on a sort of regular level, it means that you are integrating the Dharma well, you know, the ways to really study, practice, and meditate the Dharma. That's a good sign. And at least, you know, again, we're not going to have them all the time. But, you know, sometimes when we're busy, even as Ladan was saying, we're busy, sometimes we need to make the practice short. But if we've got a familiarity with it, there's a way that is constantly nourishing the mind. Even though we're not having big experiences, great experiences, there's a nourishment that happens through the power of these daily practices. And also, you know, sometimes we start a daily practice and it's like a honeymoon period, you know. You know, some of us were sharing, you know, we have it for a month and 2 months, it's great, and then it kind of falls off. It falls off, you know. And it's a bit like a bit of a marriage, you know, like it's great in the beginning and then some challenges come and we need to work with that. So we need to, yeah, we need to kind of have we have to develop some healthy relationship. It's like going into a partnership almost, a daily practice, you know, sitting with ourselves, sitting with our mind on the cushion and doing these practices. It's like developing a healthy relationship with that, with ourselves in that place. And that takes a little bit of time, you know. But I think through the power of keeping doing it and finding something, a way of doing it that it nourishes you each time, then it's easy. It becomes much easier to go to the cushion, to go to the chair, to go to that place in your house where you have to sit and just be and do some of these practices. And so just a reminder, a brief reminder, because we have been through, you know, I've mentioned this many times, but again, in this tradition, it's a lot of repetition. And it just all of a sudden we just know it by rote, you know, by hearing it so much and reading it so much. So how we really develop in this practice, we need these three limbs, you know. Wisdom, we develop a wisdom through listening. So continually listening to teachings, we develop a wisdom through reflecting, through reading, you know, and just reflection throughout our day, you know, or just sitting and reading and reflecting on the text. And then wisdom through meditation. So actually putting it into practice on our cushion, you know, in a deeper way. And we need all three of these equally. And if not, you know, if we just do one of them, even if we just decide, well, I'm just going to meditate, I mean, you know, we might get just like this image of the desert here. It's a bit like if we don't have three of these to support each other, then the mind can become a little bit like a desert. I mean, a few things might grow there, but not a lot, you know. It's like you might create a few plants and insights or plant a few good seeds and a few things sprout up. But still the mind's going to be quite dry if we don't have the three of these together. Each of these moisten and support each other. It's a sort of formula for absorbing the Dharma. And if we just, you know, sometimes people just want to meditate, but if we haven't listened and reflected enough, the meditation won't go deep and it may even be going in the wrong direction. And I think eventually you give up because you see after a while not much is happening, you know. So it's very important to do all three, you know. And of course, when we listen to teachings, we are meditating in a way, we're thinking and reflecting. And then we're also reflecting, you know. So, and also when we're meditating, we're going over teachings in our mind. So they all kind of work into each other. But in a sense, there is a wisdom that we actually generate through each individually as well. So as I mentioned, I mean, maybe 2 or 3 of you here joined me I did the introduction to ritual training here at Vajrapani last November. So you might recognize some of these slides because I pulled them from the slides because we are going to cover a few things here that are similar because this is what we need to do. We need to cover these practices on being really clear, how to practice. And I did cover some of that in that ritual training as well. So it's just a kind of always a reminder. So what are these components, of moving the mind, keeping the mind moist, steering away from this danger of insensitivity to Dharma through just like sort of listening to teachings here and there, but not really taking to heart, So how do we want to steer away from that? What do we really need to have in our practice? Why are the practices set up in a certain way? Well, as and you'll find this in all the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, this way or method of practicing. But as Manjushri advised to Lama Tsongkhapa, so Lama Tsongkhapa is the founder of the Gelug tradition of Buddhism that we're studying and practicing here. And Lama Tsongkhapa, was a great, incredible practitioner. And also he studied extensively. And then after doing extensive study for many years, he was advised he used to have visions. So I'm trying to sort of show in this image, it was the only image you could find. There's Manjushri there, sort of in the sky, in the clouds. This Manjushri is the embodiment of wisdom. And this is Lama Tsongkhapa with a green halo. And you can see Manjushri here. It's like he had this incredible ability to just have visions of Manjushri, the Buddha wisdom. And just like, you and I might be sitting talking together in a room, he was able to just kind of whip up almost. If he had a question for Manjushri, it was almost, he got to the point in his life where he was able to speak directly. Manjushri would just appear to him, like in a sort of just there, right there. And so he was advised after doing many years of extensive study, he was advised by Manjushri to go into retreat. And so he asked, Manjushri, well, how do I achieve realizations? How do I develop my mind in these teachings that I have, studied extensively? And so this was the formula that Manjushri said, you need to purify, purify the mind, cleanse the mind, karma and delusion. So we have many, many purification practices in this tradition, Vajrasattva, prostrations, reciting sutras, many, many ways to purify. You have to purify, you have to collect merit, goodness. Sometimes in America, the word merit doesn't go over well, I'm not sure. But it's like collecting goodness, collecting positive energy with your mind. And we have practices. And actually, the daily practice that we're going to go over is set up in a way so that you have all these components. So collect merit or virtue. Again, when we listen to teachings, we're reflecting them, we're always collecting merit. When we practice generosity, we're collecting merit. But there's particular ways in this tradition to sort of collect that goodness so it's more powerful, it's sort of dedicated towards us, really supporting the mind to develop realizations or insights, more deeper insights into the teachings. And then making requests. So, after we've kind of done a practice of purifying, collecting merit, then making requests means kind of, and I'll explain these more as we go through the practices, but actually asking, I've done some of the in groundwork in my mind, and I really, it's like having this wish in our minds, making requests to what we call the field of merit that we visualize, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, those beings who are guiding us, asking them to support our mind. Even when the Buddha, when he achieved enlightenment, I think mentioned before, many of you know, when he achieved enlightenment, he wasn't initially going to teach, he wasn't sure if he was going to teach. But Brahma and some of these kindly worldly beings, otherworldly beings, they came, they saw that the Buddha achieved enlightenment, and they actually offered a Dharma wheel and requested the Buddha to teach. So it's very powerful, this practice of requesting, it's like we open up in a way, we show that we have an appetite for the Dharma, by requesting. And similarly, even when we do our daily practice, it's showing our appetite, our interest, our kind of desire to get in realization. It opens us up in that way to be able to then meditate and receive the blessing and meditate on topics of the Lam Rim that we want to meditate on to transform our mind into. So this is the kind of formula, alchemy, that's used in this tradition, and all the practices are set up in that way, so we can change and develop our mind. And we're very fortunate, when Lama Zopa Rinpoche was with us, he gave, if anyone developed enough interest and enthusiasm, Rinpoche gave each person their own individual path to enlightenment, how many thousands of this practice. Many people were too afraid to ask because they didn't know if they could complete it in this life, But it was incredible fortunate, because Rinpoche gave, if you wrote to Rinpoche to ask praxis for your life, life praxis, Rinpoche gave everybody something quite individual and unique. They were all drawn from the main purification practices like Buddha prostrations, Vajrasattva practice, Guru Yoga. There's these different purification practices you can do, but within that, Rinpoche gave very unique to everybody which ones were good for them, which karma they had with which practices, which were most beneficial for them to sort of develop on the path to enlightenment. So it was very, very fortunate time to have that. So this is a picture of where I used to live, Lama Zopa Rinpoche's house in Aptos. This is one of the main offering rooms. So it's a picture of one of the altars. So where do we, so in the Lam Rim, when we read the Lam Rim, there's these, in order to be able to meditate, we really need a good environment. I mean, I think we can all probably recognize that. We need even, if all the yogis and the great lamas and practitioners of the past, even all the monastics, we live in monasteries, nunneries, centers, because we need the support of a good environment, we need to create a space where it's conducive for our mind to meditate. So we have, for all of us, we have these, what we call 6 preparatory practices to prepare our mind, bring our mind into an environment externally and internally to be able to meditate. And these practices are meditations themselves. They're not really separate. It's like, oh, I need to clean the room and prepare a place, so now I'm going to meditate. The way that Rinpoche taught us, and really how it's explained in the Lam Rim, each of these within themselves are a meditation practice. So the first preparatory practice is cleaning the place and setting up an altar. Well, in the context of these practices as well, what we want to do is, within the context of our daily practice, we want to be able to invite the blessings of the practice, the lineage of these lamas who have practiced it for many lifetimes. That's part of it. We want to invite their energy and inspiration into our heart and mind. We need that, we need that to moisten our mind. So within that, so if we're going to invite anybody at a house, we have a special guest coming, to your house, you definitely clean the place, So within, as you're going to see, when we do these practices, there's a time when we sort of invite or invoke this merit field, So we want to make sure it's, the place is nice, not just for us, but also in context of what the experience we're trying to bring about in our practice. So we start with, and I mean, I did this for many years at Rinpoche's house, cleaning the place. So for some of you may not know, but I lived at Lama Zopa Rinpoche's house. My teacher, my guru, who's was the spiritual director of all the centers, the FPMT, our organization, for 40 years. So he had a house in California, about 1 hour from Vajrapani, Aptos. And my job for many years was cleaning the house. So that was a purification practice just in itself. Cleaning, setting up the altar, preparing the water bowls. I mean, that was my main meditation practice actually for many years, So So I guess I could say I've quite a lot of experience in that. So so don't underestimate this practice of cleaning. Creates finding a spot. So some of you already have a meditation place in your house, but it's important to clean it often, you know. And actually in the Lam Rim, it says it's good to just clean it a little bit every day, you know. Now we might not have time for that, but I remember one of my teachers sort of emphasizing to me when I was going to do retreat, he said, well, every day just dust the statue of the Buddha, you know, and I was quite surprised he said that because I had all these other things to do in the retreat. And he said, every day you know, you dust this image on the altar, you know, and I mean, it takes like 10 seconds, you know. You can get these nice makeup brushes and they dust your images really well. So, so anyway, cleaning the place, and you know, even when you're cleaning the place, you can think, I'm creating a space, an altar, to benefit my mind and all beings on the path to enlightenment. You know, so anyway, we're going to go into this a little bit more detail. So I'm just mentioning a little bit why we need an altar. You know, so because you know, in this position, in this tradition, what we're trying to do, we are trying, you know, even though it feels like really, really far away right now for most of us probably, but you know, step by step, we want to have on the altar images of the Buddha's enlightened body, speech, and mind, which serve as a reminder of the goals of Buddhist practice. And we'll go into what they are in a couple of more slides coming on. So what do we need on an altar? Images of the bodies, Buddha's body, speech, and mind to remind us of where we're going in our practice. And as I said, meditation, it's a meditation because arranging our altar, putting out offerings, setting it up, cleaning it within itself, that is a meditation. Some of us might find it quite difficult to sit on the cushion for long periods of time. And as I said, my meditation for many years, in many ways, I still had a sitting practice, but it was a lot of cleaning and preparing in my teacher's house and rooms and like that. So this is actually very much, you know, a meditation in itself, preparing and setting a space for your altar. And it's like anything that we need to do in life, you know, if we want to study and develop anything, even if you want to study, you know, if you some of us do yoga, well, we need a yoga mat, we need blocks, we need a belt, we need things, you know, we need things that support our practice. So in a way, this kind of the altar environment is the workshop. It's the workshop that we need for the development of our mind. We need those kind of sources of inspiration, just connecting with them, they remind us of our goals. Even Lama Zopa Rinpoche would carry around because he travelled extensively. So he would carry a portable altar because even though when Rinpoche went to most centres, they would have a room there for Rinpoche, a place or an altar set up. But even when Rinpoche would, you know, fly and there's like transits, you know, he was flying extensively. And so often they would have transits in one or two airports. So often the monks, his attendants, would set up a small altar where Rinpoche was, you know, just two or three images so Rinpoche could do his practice. You know, often Rinpoche went on road trips, you know, through when he was, Rinpoche enjoyed to go by car a lot because, of course, you can imagine flying so much. It's really intense. So Rinpoche would enjoy road trips as well when that was possible. And the monks, you know, Rinpoche's attendants would set up even in the front seat, like two or three holy objects in front of Rinpoche so he could do prayers and make offerings. And so it kind of just, it's like at that level, if even they, you know, these lamas are doing that, then we, you know, it shows we really need that kind of environment. We need to set the right place, the right environment for practice. And even if we have an altar already, you know, Rinpoche says it's really important to just take a moment in the morning to look at what's on our altar. And just, you know, it creates here just by seeing holy objects, statues, text, you know, images of the Buddha, whatever we have, it's, you know, because at this level, you know, and as I say, enlightenment feels quite far away, yeah? So at this level, what we're doing is we're planting seeds in our mind, you know? And as Westerners, it takes a while, but there's a contentment that starts to happen, just knowing you're planting these seeds for your spiritual development. You're sowing seeds for realizations. And one powerful way to do that is these holy objects, these sacred objects, having an altar, just connecting with the energy of your altar every day. Because our mind is like, it's kind of like a recording device, you know? Everything in our mind, we're picking up things that are appearing to our mind all the time. And depending how we interact with them, we create stronger or lighter seeds in the mind, you know, imprints on the mind. So, but holy objects have this power that just due to the power of them, they create a powerful seed in our mind, no matter what the intention, because they embody this quality enlightenment. So every day, every moment, they're bringing our mind to enlightenment. So again, having this altar space with some inspiring objects, you know, and the images of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, it's just nourishing our mind all the time. And we can feel that when some of us come to Dharma centers. We can feel the power of the holy objects there, how they support us in the meditation in a way that maybe we're not able to do at home, but we still need that environment. We need to create it in whatever way we can in our own house. This is an image here of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. For any of you who don't know Rinpoche in the background, and this is Rinpoche, he had liberated a buffalo, and this is in Nepal at our main monastery in Kopan in Kathmandu. And Rinpoche's they had liberated a buffalo, so he brought the buffalo to the stupa, and this is one monk, one of Rinpoche's attendants. He's blessing the buffalo. This is on here is there are many relics inside, Buddha relics and mantras Rinpoche used to carry around. And even when we went to his teachings, all of us would get sort of bonked on the head with this, you know. So similarly, this is what's happening here. And Rinpoche's reciting mantras and sutras to the cow, you know. So this is how he benefited extensively animals like that, not just liberating them from the danger of death, you know, them are going to be slaughtered or killed, but he would then give them Dharma imprints. So like that, we need that too, you know, and it really, really supports and it builds up in our mind. So that's how we do that, is by, you know, having an altar, having a place of power that brings a power and a support for us to be able to sit and meditate and practice. And these are just some examples of altars. And I mean, I know we can't do as extensive as that. Oh, sorry, go back again. We might not be able to do as extensively as that, but it's you know, we do need something, because as you say, some of us we find it difficult to get on this cushion, or even if we do, the honeymoon period wears off, and then it's like it's hard to get back on the cushion again. So, but the more we create this space, this environment, and our sort of wholesome relationship with our meditation cushion, then it's like we can, you know, it's easier to practice. So, what does the components of an altar look like? So this here, again, an image of the Buddha, you know, an image of the Buddha, because, you know, even as Kate was sharing with us, you know, we don't all feel like this deep connection with the Buddha, but we feel a connection with the Buddha's teachings, you know, and that's who the Buddha is for us. Even when the Buddha passed away, his close disciples said, you know, of course, they felt very close to the Buddha. They met him in person. They received all the teachings in person. But what the Buddha said is, you know, they said, well, what we do when you're not here? And he says, you have my teachings. That is me, you know. Yet my teachings are what you have from me. So that's what we have. That is our connection, is the teachings with the Buddha. So, and also, you know, as we develop, we also we can actually develop what we call the body of the Buddha. You know, we're trying to develop the body, the speech, and the mind, you know. We touched on a little bit in the refuge module, some of the qualities of the Buddha's body, you know, so he doesn't have a kind of heavy body like ours that's subject to birth and sickness and decay and death, you know. The body of the Buddha goes on forever. It's in this form because this is a form we can identify with. It looks a bit like our body, you know, 2 arms, 2 legs, we can identify with that. But the quality of the Buddha's body goes way beyond what, you know, an ordinary body that we have. This is a mental body. He has a spiritual body that's full of joy, full of bliss. And every pore and atom is filled with wisdom, you know, emanates wisdom. So it's more like reminding us of the qualities of the Buddha's body. And every time we look at look at that, maybe put our palms together, we creating these seeds or imprints on the mind that causes us to achieve the body of the Buddha. So if we have either an image or a a picture or a small statue of the Buddha, that's we need some image of the body of the Buddha. We want to have a text, a sutra, Heart Sutra. So if any time any of you come and visit Vajrapani, we actually have many sutras here that we offer. So if you come here and you don't have something to put on your altar, so right now, if you don't have a sutra, you can also just put like a Dharma text, any Dharma text that inspires you. You can put that on the altar, but some kind of text, and usually that goes on, the right side here or the left side when you're looking straight at it. And then on the other side, you have, so this text embodies the speech of the Buddha, so that's something also we want to achieve, enlightened speech. Right now at this level, we just want to have speech that benefits, that doesn't harm others. But on top of that, and then once we develop a certain level of speech, we develop more and more positive qualities of speech. I mentioned in the refuge module, the speech of Buddha has 64, it's like 64 melodic qualities, so it's kind of inconceivable again. And even we can say, what's the speech? Well, the Buddha taught 84,000 sets of teachings. That's like mind-blowing, to have that amount of material, spiritual material the Buddha had in his mind to bring benefit to others. Many, many sets of teachings, and then they came into the 3 baskets of teachings, the Vinaya, the Sutra, the Abhidharma. So inconceivable what the Buddha taught just when he was in, in this kind of the human form 2,500 years ago. So we put a symbol of that on the altar so that we can achieve that speech and we can develop that. What comes from the enlightened speech is the realizations. And in many ways, the enlightened speech is the most important to us because that's the way that the Buddhas can mostly communicate with us. As you say, as Kate said, we didn't meet the Buddha, okay? So we don't have that connection, but how we really know the Buddha is through his teachings. How we really develop our own Buddhahood are through the teachings. We need the teachings, so it's the most important for us, And then this is a stupa here. Symbol enlightened mind. So we've got the body, the speech, and the mind. So the stupa, again, we can have an image of the stupa. It's easily to download something like that online and maybe put it in a frame. If we don't have access to a stupa, we do, again, if you visit Vajrapani, we do often have stupas that we can give away here. And again, this is just symbolizing the qualities enlightened mind, that we want to achieve as well. So ideally, you have these 3 on the altar. And then if you have a spiritual teacher, then to have images of your spiritual teachers, those who inspire you, which is really really important because that's where we receive the teachings, is through the teachers, So again, we have His Holiness the Dalai Lama here. So often in this tradition, the image of the teachers is often placed above the Buddha. It doesn't have to be like that, simply because the Buddha's teachings come to life through the teachers. The teachers, and we go into this kind of mythology a little bit more, why we think like that in the spiritual teacher module. But, we receive the teachings through the teachers, they bring them to life for us, and so it's, so if, you can either have them alongside or you can place them a little bit higher if you're able to do that. But certainly it's really good if you want to place some, if you feel like inspired by certain teachers, to place images of them on the altar as well. And then alongside that, we have some lights, and then we have, if you want to put a set of offerings. So we're going to also just cover the water bowl offerings today as well. So again, so ideally, you set up your altar, you have, if you've not already got it, and it's something that we can always, our altar can be a place we can go back to. Cleaning the altar is a really, really, even if you've only got time once a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, to clean it really nicely. As we're cleaning all the objects, we can think we're cleaning our mind of karma and delusion. We're cleaning all beings' obstacles, cleaning our anger, our fear, our anxiety. As we dust the altar, that's a meditation itself, when we do that. And then when then the meditation and making offerings on the altar, lights and flowers, Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to love offering silk flowers. So the nice thing about them, you don't have to keep buying flowers. So you can put silk flowers or a nice plant, on the altar. And then just making it your own, making it something that you really enjoy to look at and make offerings towards, And even when you buy fresh fruit or cookies or snacks, like you can put them on the altar for a couple of days before you enjoy them, So that's, you can do all that. So it's kind of making the altar your own. I mean, there's a certain setup, but it's also making it your own space and a space you enjoy to be in. So this is just another way of setting up altars, but we're not going to. The main one I want to cover is how we do. So So that's the first practice that we have to kind of really do. It's so important, setting the space, the place for our spirit, for our meditation. And sometimes, as Urs was saying, sometimes it can get a bit, our practice can get a bit familiar, maybe a bit stale. So, spruce up your altar a little bit, put a little bit more offerings out, change it around a bit, make it more interesting again, your altar, reorganize it a little bit, make it more fun to be there. That's another way, just to spice up your practice a little bit, spend a little bit more time around the altar, because it's amazing what the impact of these holy objects, or buy yourself a new tanka, a new image, frame few more pictures, make your altar a little bit more interesting, if it's become kind of routine or ordinary, make it more like, as you see here, this is really interesting. So we're not all going to maybe do as extensive as that, but making it, putting out more offerings, arranging them more beautifully, bringing a bit more inspiration to our practice. That's one way to do it, just working with the altar, shifting it around from time to time. So in terms of like, what do you offer? I mentioned silk flowers. We can offer beautiful lights at Vajrapani here, because we can't really use flames here at Vajrapani. We're in the woods. We're in California. So we bought these beautiful little butter lamps that you can plug in, and it looks like a real flame, but they have a that's like a Tibetan butter lamp. Maybe next week I'll show you one. I don't have a picture online, sorry, but they look really nice on the altar. So you can offer lights. I mean, of course, if you're in a place where it's fine to offer candles, offer incense, you can offer um beautiful, delicious foods, anything like, anything that you really enjoy. It's not really, there's not really a limit to it, as long as it's clean and you've also bought it, honestly. I mean, I'm sure we haven't stolen it or anything like that, or swindled it off as someone, oh, I really like yours, and sorry, someone gave you something because you kind of coveted it. You don't want to offer something like that. So just as long as the offerings are got in an honest way, that's also really important as well. So, but what you don't offer, which I think you probably know, ideally not. I mean, flowers picked from that's fine if they've offered them to you, but you don't offer them if they don't belong to you. Things like leftovers or broken bits, okay, I had a nice cookie, I'll just offer the broken bit on the altar. Nothing like that. Cigarette smoke, which probably we're not going to do. Also, generally, it says if you intend to offer something, it's good to offer that, not change your mind. So once you offer it, it's really good to put that on the altar. And also to offer like some of the best things, that you enjoy yourself, the best of what you can. And not offering alcohol, knives, sharp things. Offering, you don't want to offer arguments. We want to be harmonious, So it's just giving you an idea of some of the things that's not good to offer, and just being creative. And I mean, it can be your complete creative space, I mean, I really enjoyed when I first met the Dharma. That was one of the things I really enjoyed, was creating my own altar. within the parameters of what we're, what needs to be there, but also making it really creative around and keeping it clean. And I felt like it really, really had a big impact on my mind. And it still does. I mean, everywhere I go, I try to have at least a small altar with me. I have quite a big altar in my house. I think I remember the last time when I went home to visit my mum, I decided not to take many things from my altar. And I noticed that after about a week, it had quite an impact on my mind. So I thought, okay, next time I'm going to make sure I bring enough things for my altar because I was finding it definitely not a little bit not so easy to meditate. And I think just not having that altar space for me made quite a big difference. How are we doing so far? I just want to check. Is there any questions so far? Comments? Anybody want to share anything? That's quite a bit of material. I know some of you are quite familiar with altars, but for those of you who are not, how many of us here don't have an altar space? Zan? Mark, you have an altar? Okay, great. So maybe this is not new for Denise, you have an altar space? Yeah. So you have things like the image of Buddha, the image of a text. So this is not really too new for, okay, Kimberly, do you have a question?
No, I was just saying that to represent I
Oh
don't
yeah,
have
you
an
have
altar.
one. Sorry, okay. Yeah. Oh, you don't have it. So so yeah, maybe it's nothing new for most of you, but hopefully you maybe got, so again, maybe just to mention that I think not to underestimate the power of our altar to support our mind. That's like the basic support. And even if we get up in the morning, we're busy that day, we don't have a lot of time, you can just basically, I'm going to sort of outline a way you can just connect with your altar, make some offerings, just sit even for a few minutes, take refuge, and that's already a little bit, that's just connecting in already. That's already just setting your time for the day, meditating with your body in a way when we don't have a lot of time to meditate mentally for the day. Is that making sense? Even if you have 5-10 minutes, it's like, because actually the monastic robes, these all center, my vows center around actions that I'm refraining from doing with my body and my speech. Because the body and the speech are a little bit easier to subdue, to calm down than the mind, yeah? When we look at things like no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, they're a little bit easier than the ones with the speech, harsh speech, divisive speech, speech that generally harms others. They're not, that can be more difficult to practice. And then when we look at the non-virtues with the mind, they're even more difficult to practice, yeah? Like ill will. I mean, even though we don't want to think badly of someone, it can often just come up. It's very hard to keep a handle on. So the mind is more subtle. So the body's more gross, speech is a little bit less gross, and then the energy, the mind is even more subtle, yeah. So it's almost like that with meditation. So by doing these things with the body, it supports the mind. We're working with the body to create merit because it's easier almost than sometimes just sitting on the cushion and dealing with our monkey mind. So we start by doing positive things with the body, and that starts to help to settle the speech and the mind. So that's the kind of idea as well. We set up the altar, and even when we sit in the Vairocana position, we need to kind of check what's going on there, be bodily in the right place so that it supports the mind. So similarly, we get up, we make sure the altar's nice, we dust. Even if you can't, I mean, of course, some of these texts were written at a time when you got a kusha broom and you would clean the room. But we're not going to get up in the morning and put the vacuum on before you. I mean, it's like, there's no way you want to vacuum before you meditate. It's a bit noisy, yeah? And most of us might have a carpet. I mean, maybe if you have a wooden floor, you could just lightly sweep it for a couple of sweeps. But I thought, I'm not getting up in the morning and like putting the vacuum on, before I wake up. Because ideally, you clean the room, you clean a little bit, and then so what we could do is just dust off one of the statues on, these makeup brushes are really good, with all the bristles. So I didn't end up using makeup brushes much this life, but I've used them a lot for the altars. So I have a couple of makeup brushes up in my house, so because they're excellent for cleaning, all the holy oil, and you just keep them for that. You don't also then put your blusher on or something after. You just, you buy one you buy things. So the towel that we're going to use for the water bowls, anything they're using to clean the altar, you try, I mean, unless financially it's difficult, but you try and keep all that separate just for your altar, because that's part of the purification practice. Even when you clean your bowls, when we're going to go into water bowl offerings, you use the same, you try and just have a separate dish tea towel just for that. For anything on the altar, try and keep it separate because that's actually purifying your mind. It's like that's part of the purification, the cleanliness. And it does impact your mind. At Rinpoche's house, we would have so many towels for this altar and that altar, and we had like these 3 layers of dish towels for this and that and the guru, and it was quite complicated. You don't have to go into that complication. But for your altar in your meditation space, try to have just cleaning implements for that. You will find that that's purifying your mind, because the Buddhas are pure. Yeah, they have pure bodies, pure mind, pure speech, and we don't. So we want it, it's like that's the sort of reasoning. We keep everything clean so we can have that clean, enlightened mind of the Buddha. So this is what we're doing here. So even, because as Westerners, we can I don't want to give piles of things to do because then we start beating ourselves up because we can't do it all. What we should think is, okay, I only have 15 minutes in the morning. Well, I'm just going to then my meditation is setting my altar, cleaning it off, then I'm going to, we're going to do our bowls if you want to do that, or I'm going to, I bought some nice flowers, I'm going to put them on the altar, and then even if you just have 5 minutes to sit, you notice, if your mind's better because you spent that time on your altar. I think you will notice that, you know. So so the next week or two, what I want to really go over is the altar, and then how we kind of just set our minds as we do the altar and we sit down, and even if we've just got another 5-10 minutes, what do we do with that time, and then of course if we've got another 15 minutes, that's great, and we've got an hour, then there's always more to do, but just being happy with what we have the time for to do and doing that, going through these practices in that way. So next week, because I don't have time really this week to start on the water bowls. It won't take too long, but next week we'll just go into the water bowls, how you offer water, because water is, and again, this was the main purification practice that that I was given. As I said, there's many purification practices, Vajrasattva, prostration, and in this Geluk tradition, one of them is offering water bowls. And the nice thing about it for us right now, I mean, water is precious, but it's something easier for us to offer. We can offer that without spending lots of money. And there's a lot of benefits with, again, just putting out these 8 water bowls. So we'll just go in briefly how we offer them, what you think, alongside like just starting to think about doing a basic prostration. We'll cover that next week. What does our basic prostration look like, the mantra, and how we do that, all these things to settle the mind into a sort of more sitting practice, so how they prepare the mind for meditation. And of course, even within the context of, water bowls, you can do many, but at least we try and do 7 on the altar. And then we set our mind by prostrations, and then we sit on the cushion. And of course, even with the prostration practice, there's a more extensive practice called the 35 Buddhas. Has anyone done or is doing the 35 Buddha practice here? Looking for any? I didn't think anyone was doing it. Bay, do you do it at all from time to time, or? Bay, where's Bay? You moved. There you are. The screen moves around sometimes.
I should be, but
Sorry. Well, your
I'm doing
prostration.
it. Yeah, I'm doing a different
You're doing a
liturgy.
different practice, yeah.
Yeah.
You're still doing a one of the purification I know that you're still engaged in a purification, a more
Yes,
extensive
yes,
purification.
I'm doing the
So I think many of us
prostration.
may not be at a point where we want to take on something like the 35 Buddha practice, but at least what I thought is just again introduce the importance of doing some prostrations, how we do that, and how all these they are meditations and they also set the mind for deeper meditation. And it shouldn't really be something, certainly for practicing Lam Rim, and we want to develop our mind in this path, we can't really skip them. We can't just say, I'm just going to sit down and not do any of that. It's, our mind's not easy, yeah? Our mind's not easy. So we need to, as much as I say, I spent years using my body for meditation, cleaning, cooking, cleaning the garden. So we can do that right now. So we should, when we can, use the body that's more, when that's, when we create merit with that, we use it to do virtue that supports the speech and the mind, which are more difficult to tame, more difficult to get a handle on. Robin, you have a question? Yep.
Great, trying to unmute myself. So when I was sick, I needed to get better, so I worked in my garden, and I decided to add a pond with 3 areas, and then I put a Buddha in the middle, and now I sit there in the morning. And
Oh,
that has been kind of like an offering for all the dragonflies that then feed the hummingbirds, then also eat the fruit in the garden. And then I just put the fruits that fall, in one area, and then I pick the most ripe ones and I put them in front of the Buddha. Is that okay?
no, of
Like,
course, that's beautiful to do
I just
that.
did it. I mostly just did it because it's a nice place to sit and I can listen to the birds and feel like part of the whole ecosystem of Santa Cruz there. But I also thought that if the water was there, because there wasn't a pond before, it would be helpful for them.
Well, that's a beautiful motivation to do that as well. There's no question. And I mean, we need to have an environment where we feel peaceful,
Yeah,
definitely.
it's very easy
But
to feel peaceful there
yeah,
watching the little fish.
yeah. But at the same time, you might get distracted by doing some of that.
Yeah,
So
I have to
I would
close
say
my
that,
eyes.
that's a nice place maybe after your meditation to go and
Okay.
sit because you'll start looking at this and that. And
Yeah.
of course, the great holy beings in the past went to caves, they meditated in nature, but they didn't sit and look at all the birds and all the wildlife. You also need to go inside at some point.
Yeah,
So that's wonderful that you've got that space. And of course, it's benefiting others. And I mean, it's lovely if you've got an inside and an outside space to
I
kind
do.
of reflect. It's almost like that's your place of reflection.
I
And
take
then,
my puppies there because they want to run around. So that
yeah,
I just want to make sure it wasn't offensive in some way.
no, no, not at all. That's lovely. Thank you for
Okay,
sharing.
thanks.
Ladan, we'll have Ladan and then we'll do the dedications.
Yes, Venerable, I have a question about I know I've heard Venerable Yonten told us in one session that 35 ideally 35 Buddha purification Buddha in the morning and Vajrasattva at the evening will be the best. But is there any other like shorter practice, 30 instead of 35 Buddhas if we have no time? Do you
Yeah.
know another thing?
Yeah, it's quite long, that one. Let me think about it, Ladan, because what I'm introducing is just doing the 3 prostrations. Because yeah, I know everyone doesn't have time for that. I don't know if there's really something in between, but let me think about it a little bit. Yeah, it depends on your time as well. But I think most of us might just have time for 3 prostrations. Starting into the practice of 35 Buddhas does take another level of commitment, for sure, because that takes more like, to do it one time maybe takes, once you get familiar with it, can take about 15 minutes. But even if you can do it once a week, or once a month, you can set your sights on that. Maybe I
Thank you.
understand that you can't do it every day when you've got a full-time job. So when you can't do certain practices, but you want to, you think,
Uh-huh.
okay, I'll do it once a week on my day
Yeah,
off. I'll do
great.
it,
Yeah.
I think just work around it.
Uh-huh. Good
Because,
idea. Thank
yeah,
you. Thank
okay.
you.
So let's just take a moment to, I'll just bring up the dedication prayer. And we'll do our dedications. Sorry, I'll need to go forward a little bit because we didn't, there we go, right. So again, just taking a minute just to see if there's anything, again, we're just mostly going over the basics tonight. So some of you might have heard already, but maybe even tonight, maybe we feel a bit more inspired to kind of put a little bit, few more offerings on our altar. You know, if that's going to help just to refresh our practice, bring more energy to our sitting place, you know, making more offerings, getting some new flowers, maybe new candles. You know, those kind of ways can just bring a bit more kind of inspiration to our practice in the morning, you know, or just changing our altar around a little bit, maybe getting a new image or statue, maybe copying a picture of someone, you know, a teacher who inspires us, you know, and putting that on your altar. So we need to play around a little bit with things on our altar just to freshen it up a little bit. Things can get kind of dry and boring in our mind quite quickly often. Can be the case, you know, even with our practice for sure, you know. So we need to be skillful in our practice. Work with this mind that's a little bit like a baby, you know, it gets tired, fed up easily. So we need to play with it a little bit, you know, play things around. How can we entertain ourselves a little bit so we're happy to go to the cushion? And just dedicating all the positive energy of the class by listening and discussing tonight. Thank you everybody for your input and for sharing where you want to be, where you want to go or be in your practice. Dedicating all that positive energy, you know, just connecting with the fact that we are fortunate to be able to have access to so many Dharma teachings, so many ways and methods to develop and support our mind, just to bring about basic happiness. And of course, all the other qualities up to enlightenment. We have many, many teachers, many translations now of text, so much available to us, you know, it's unbelievable fortune. And, you know, it won't always be like that for sure, you know. So just connecting with that preciousness that we have right now, the Dharma in our lives. And may all beings enjoy Dharma, may all beings enjoy spiritual practice, and may all beings develop their mind in these two precious qualities, bodhicitta, wisdom realizing emptiness. Oi Janju Senju Rinpoche, Mage Panam Ge Gyurchi, Ye Pa Nyampa Me Pa Yi, Gonne Gondu Pelwar Shok. May the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline but increase more and more. And just in English, due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. So we always dedicate in these two ways. And it says here to seal with merit, the merits with emptiness. So again, we haven't covered that module yet, but just thinking the nature of our mind is emptiness, clarity, vast like the sky. But it's not empty as in nothing inside. Within that emptiness, there's a great richness and joy and happiness. That's what all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, all the holy beings experience, this incredible joy, no matter how much adversity, they have this joyousness. So may all beings experience that, including ourselves, get to that place in our heart and mind. Okay, thank you so much. Nice to see you all. Yeah. And so we have the readings. There is quite a lot of reading this module, so just do what you can. In terms of the Lam Rim book, the 365 Late Day Lam Rim book, there's not really a section on establishing a daily practice as such. So just, you know, work through that as you can. But you do have the reading list. So please, if you have time this week to cover that. And next week we'll go into water bowls, prostrations, and just a little bit more, you know, how we can at least do 15, 20 minutes starting the day like that. And then we just expand on that as we go through the class, expanding the practice.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Thank you, Venerable. Good night, everybody.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, Bay and Urs. Good night.